Today we're going to start off with lecture number 6. This is the second part for chapter number 3 that was about analyzing the marketing environment. Right. So let's start with the learning objectives. We did the first part, that is describe the environmental forces that affect the company's ability to serve its customer. And today we're going to start off with the rest of the objectives of this chapter and try to meet those objectives. We studied about microenvironment in the last lecture, and we broadly defined marketing environment. So marketing environment was something that includes actors and forces outside marketing that affect marketing management's ability to build and maintain successful relationship with the customers, right? So any force that is outside marketing, it's not directly in your control as such, that would be the marketing environment. Now there are two types of marketing environments. There's microenvironment and then there's a macroenvironment. Microenvironment is a type of environment which includes your suppliers, your customers, publics and all such bodies. What is a distinguishing feature of microenvironment? That you can control it with your policies, you can control it with your strategies, right? So the company can control the micro environment. It is the immediate environment that surrounds the company and is pretty much in control of the marketer, right? So what what falls under microenvironment? The company, the suppliers, the marketing intermediaries, the customers, competitors and the publics. We talked about the company. Company has various departments and we talked about how these departments need to be well coordinated in order to deliver superior value to the customer. Then we talked about supply. Supplies are the people that you get material from, raw material from, supplies from. So all the supplier, you need to coordinate with the supplier so as to strengthen your value delivery network. If a supplier acts out, that means you would not be able to deliver your promised value, which would lead to customer distress, and that's what you don't want. Then we talked about marketing intermediaries. Marketing intermediaries are what? These are all the companies that help you sell the product, distribute the product to its final buyers. We talked about resellers. Resellers are the people who get the product and then resell it. So that includes your wholesalers and retailers. They are resellers. Then comes your physical distribution firms, all those firms that take your product from the point of origin, that is the company, to the buyer, to the end buyer. So all those firms fall under physical distribution firm. Then we talked about marketing service agencies. Now these are all the agencies that help you promote the product. So for instance, your media houses, your advertising agencies, these are all marketing service agency. And then financial intermediaries. How financial intermediaries fall under your microenvironment? How do they fall? Because many a times you cannot purchase the product upfront. You cannot make the cash payment then and there, right? So you might want to get loan for getting your product, right? So that's how financial intermediaries play a huge role in your market, in your microenvironment. Other than that, there's a lot of other aspects in which financial intermediaries are important, but this is one of the aspects in which financial intermediaries are extremely important. Then we talked about customers and the different types of customers when it comes to businesses. The first type of customer is your end customer, the final customer, after which the product would not go into further transformation, right? So that is the customer market. Then business market is a market where the product is bought and it is further transformed, right? It's not resold, but it's transformed, right? There's a value addition that goes on.
The customer market, the customer buys the final product and doesn't sell it.
Yeah, it's the end, it is where the chain would end. The product would be consumed there.
But
So
sometimes the customers do resell their,
no, that is the resale market. That is a resale market. That's not the customer market. So you bought the product for your personal use, right? So you use the product, that is the customer market. Then you resold the product, that would fall under reseller market.
Ma'am, when we transform the product, then we call it value addition, right?
Mm.
Then can we call it product development as well?
Product development is a different concept than value addition, right? Product development is developing a product from the scratch, right? Sort of R&Ds in that sense, right? But in value addition, what you do is you get the material, you add value to it, and then you sell it, right? So product development is a different aspect than value addition, right? Government markets are the people who buy the product and then give it to people. So governments buy the product and they give it to people. Then international markets are your international buyers, sellers, customer markets, all the markets that are international in nature. Then we talked about competitors, how it is important to see your competitors. Why is it important to see your competitors?
So that we can have edge over them and we know
Right.
their
So you
weakness and our strengths.
Very right. So you position yourself against your competitor in the perceptual map of the customer, right? So you position yourself in the perceptual map based on what your competitor does. So you need to understand what the competitor is doing. If you would not understand, you might lose your market share to your competitors. So you need to continuously see what your competitor is doing. Also, we discussed the fact that there's no right strategy. There's no correct way of doing business. It is all about what works for you, how you execute it, right? So that is competitors. And we talked about publics as well. Who are publics?
Actual and potential interest in
Any group that has an actual or potential interest in your organization's ability to achieve its objective. Then we talked about many types of publics. There may be financial publics who help you get the funds, right? So funds में आपको कौन help करता है? Who helps you get funds? Equity and creditors. So equity comes from shareholders, right? So shareholders give you equity, stockholders give you equity, and then you get loans from banks, creditors. Media publics includes magazines, newspaper, government includes all those who make the rules and regulations, and you need to abide by those legislation that is done by the government. So you need to abide by the rules and regulations of any land that you're working in. Then citizen action public, these include the various groups that are formed and they sort of protect their interests. So for instance, we talked about animal rights activists. So somebody who's an animal rights activist, he would want to protect animals, right? Somebody who is an environmentalist, he would want to engage with companies in a way that they use environment-friendly strategies, right? So you have citizen action publics as well that you need to deal with. Then local publics include these include neighborhood residents and community organizations. So whatever community that you're working in, you need to have them on board, make sure that they are happy with you, right? So you need to engage with them as well. Then general publics are is the general public image, and internal publics include your employees. Very right. Coming down to the macro environment, that is today's topic. Now what is macro environment? What is macro environment? Macro environment talks about larger societal forces, right? So all those factors that are beyond the control of the company in short run are macro environmental factors. We talked about how short run and long term, how in short run you cannot affect the macro environment, and in long term how could you possibly affect the macro environment. What example did we do? Okay. Anybody else? We did the example of Coke. How Coke became synonymous with America, pop culture, right? Pop culture originated from America. So Coke became synonymous with American culture, and that's how it became a part of a culture. That's how it impacted the culture of a land in long run. But in short run, it could not have done that, right? So this is how companies deal with the macro environment. They cannot influence it in the short run, but they try to influence the macro environment in the longer run. Talking about the first type of environment, that is demographic environment. What is demographics?
Age, gender,
Population.
So observable characteristics in a population that you can observe are demographics. So that would include age, gender, race, occupation, and other statistics, right? So these are all demographic factors of market, right? So demographic environment includes So why is demographics important to businesses?
I mean, we don't know about demographics, and we can't be that much successful. For example, if there are many young people and we start selling their medicines, so that can't be that much effective that in a place where there are elderly people, you sell it over there.
Okay, makes sense. Or
Ma'am, it narrows down the target market.
very right. It narrows down it helps you identify the target market. So business is done for the people, by the people. And what is this? It is a study of people. It is a study of population. So if you have to do the business for the people, how would you do it if you do not understand the people, right? So for understanding the people, you need to study the people. And how do you do it? Through demographics. So demographics would help you segment the market. It would help you identify your target market. Once you've identified the target market, only then you can carry out the business further. So that's the second point. Demographic environment is important because it involves people, and people make up the markets, right? Now talking about demographic trends. Now demographics around the world is in constant change, right? It is continuously changing. Now how is it changing? The age of people, it is changing every year. The family structure has changed over the years. The geographic population shifts have changed. The educational characteristics are changed, and the diversity in the population has changed. We're going to see all these factors one by one now. Now talking about changing age structure of the population. Now age structure in a market is extremely important. It would tell you what product would have what market share, or what market, what is the strength of that market, right? So for instance, in Pakistan, 40% of the population is somewhere below 18 to 17 years. So if you're introducing a product that is for that particular segment, let's say youngsters apparel, that's your product, you make clothing products for youngsters, that essentially means you have a target market of, or you have a market of 40, well, not exactly target market, but you have a market of 40% of the population, right, which is a huge chunk of population. Talking about another country where there are elderly people who are more introducing a product that would be for that age group, that would be more appropriate in a sense that you would be able to have a bigger market share. Right? So you need to see the changing age structure of the population to see what market do you have. Right? It's not always right to go for the bigger market. It depends upon the fit that you can find. Can you really provide a product for youngsters? That's the question. If you can, it's a good idea to go for youngsters in Pakistan. If you cannot, then going for the youngsters would not be a good idea. So you need to find a strategic fit between what you can do and what market opportunity is there. So targeting young population in Pakistan necessarily would not work, but the chances are higher because the market is bigger. Now there's increasing urban population as well. There are people who are coming from rural areas to urban areas for many different reasons. There are better education opportunities, there are better medical opportunities, there are better job opportunities. There could be plenty of reasons why somebody would want to move from rural area to an urban area. But the trend is people are increasingly trying to move from rural area to the urban area. Now according to a study, by 2025, the number of people who would move from rural area to the urban area in India would go from 3.18 million to 523 million. Now 523 million it's a huge change, right? From 3.18 million to 523 million, it is a gigantic change, right? So this is how you want to study how markets are changing, right? Then talking about growth in rural population as well. So not only your urban population is growing, but your rural population is also growing. So there's high fertility rate when it comes to rural population, right? So the number of people in the rural area is continuously increasing, and according to a study, the rural population will triple in India in the coming years, right? So if there was one product being consumed, there would be three now. Triple ho jayegi India mein consumption of products in rural areas because of increase in the population.
Then, but people like disabled are dying as well, so we say ki population is growing.
Population, I didn't get your question. Could you explain?
People are dying as well, like
The rate is not the similar. The medicine and the improvement in the medical sector, it has increased the average lifespan, right? So every lifespan was somewhere people used to die by the age of 40, 50. But now people in the West are living 80, 90 years, right? This is because of superior medical treatments that they get. So you've increased the lifespan of the humans. So the number of births that are taking place are more than the number of deaths taking place. So the fertility rate is higher than the mortality rate.
Ma'am, why are we not studying the demographics of Pakistan? Why are we not studying demographics?
We're not studying in this particular lecture. We are studying, we're generally studying the demographics in general. The assignment that I'm going to give you is that of Pakistan, right? Changing family structure. Now there is changing family structure that is there in today's market. So when I say changing family structure, we used to have traditional families initially, right? So initially, what was the structure like? There was a traditional family. So you would have your grandparents living with you, you would have your aunt and uncle live with you, and everybody would live in a single house, right? So this was a traditional joint family system. But as we have evolved, we are now coming down to nuclear families. What is a nuclear family? Independent family system. Anybody else?
Small family.
Small families. So a nuclear family system is a family system whereby there's husband, there's wife, and their kids. That is about it. So you don't have all other elements of the traditional family system in it. So we're moving from traditional family system to nuclear family system here in Pakistan, right? But let's say in West there are other types of family structures as well. So you have single parents, you have divorced parents, you have other types of stepmother. So this is all changing family structure, and the changing family structure is again providing marketers with the need opportunity to tailor the products according to the changing family structure. So somebody who does not live in a traditional joint family system, they might need a daycare facility if both the parents need to go out for work, right? They have to leave the kids somewhere. So if they were living in a traditional family system, somebody from their own house might be able to take care of the child. But if they're living in a nuclear family, they would have to go out to a daycare or hire somebody to babysit the kid, right? So this is how marketers try to exploit the opportunities that they come up with due to changing family structure. Then coming down to changing role of women. Now initially women did not work in formal offices and universities and different organizations. They were working at home and they were raising kids, taking care of the kitchen, cleaning the house, traditional household jobs. And that's what women were expected to do. But these days, the trend has changed. The increasing number of women who are working in the market, they're working for different organizations, as a result of which the income that average household gets has increased, right? So if a woman and her husband both are earning, that means they have more income, right? If they have more income, that necessarily means they have more disposable income. What is disposable income?
Excess money.
All right, access money. So once you've settled all your necessities, whatever you're left with is your disposable income. So you've paid the utilities, you've paid the rent for your house, you've bought the groceries, whatever is left is your disposable income. So disposable income has increased with changing role of women. Once disposable income changes, that means your purchasing pattern would also change. If your purchasing pattern would change, that is an opportunity for the marketers, right? So changing role of women has increased disposable income. Increase in disposable income would lead to increase in demand for, let's say, luxuries, for instance. Increase in their demand would lead to more production, more employment, stronger economies, right? So that's why you say that the women should work for stronger economies, right? Then the next one is more white-collar jobs availability. So there are more white-collar jobs available. There are more jobs in the offices for the simple reason that the economies are growing, more organizations are coming up. So there are more white-collar, there's more job availability than, let's say, as compared to 1950s. So number of jobs available in 1950s were far less than what is available in 2019, right? Coming down to increasing diversity. Now there is, let's take the example of America. Now America has people from all over the world, and that's what we call, the whole idea is called melting pot. Why do you call it melting pot? Because people from around the world come into America and they come together and formulate a new culture. They melt into a new culture, and that is the American culture, right? So American culture, it has become has become famous or is a result of many other cultures coming together. If you go to Toronto, specifically in Canada, because there's so many people from the Asian companies, you talk about Sri Lankans, Bangladeshis, Pakistanis, Chinese. So you have people from all countries who come there, work there. And that's what formulates their culture. So it's the diversity of their culture that makes them, that makes their society so special, right? And that's what their current government stresses upon. So the Trudeau's regime talks about diversity and how it is its core strength. And that's why these days there's a lot of immigration that is going on in Canada for the simple reason that they value diversity, right? Now, how does that impact a marketer? So let's take the example of America again. See, it's a very diverse society. You have people from all the races. So for instance, black people, the companies who specifically design clothes for black people, they're very vibrant, neon colors, right? So black people generally tend to wear those colors. So there are companies who design clothes for black people. There are companies who design strategies to attract a certain group within that community. So for instance, if you want to attract Spanish people, they would make specific advertisements specially targeted for the Spanish people. If you're trying to sell something to the people from Indo-Pak region, they would adopt, maybe they would hire somebody maybe from Bollywood to endorse their product, right? So this is how marketers try to capitalize on increasing diversity. Now coming down to the second environment, that is the economic environment. Now economic environment consists of factors that affect consumers' purchasing power and spending patterns. So the better the economic condition of the country, that means more income, or rather more employment. More employment would lead to better income. Better income would lead to more demand. More demand would lead to more production. More production would lead to more employment. More employment would lead to better income. So it's a cycle. It's a cycle that would continue, right? So for stronger economies, people would have jobs. They would have purchasing power. They would purchase. There would be demand. There would be production, and again, in turn, employment. This is a cycle that goes on in strong economies. So same goes for the weak economy. People do not have jobs. They do not have purchasing power. They cannot purchase. There's no demand. There's less demand, less production, less employment, right? So it's a cycle. Now talking about the two types of economies that have been discussed in your book. There are subsistence economies, and then there are industrial economies. So subsistence economies would be what? Subsistence economies are the economies who, whatever they do, they consume it, right? So, they grow wheat, they grow rice, they get petroleum, whatever they generate out of their system, they consume it themselves. That is a subsistence economy. On the other hand, on the very extreme of the spectrum, there is industrial economy. Industrial economy are the richer economies, right? So for instance, American economy is an industrial economy. So all the economies lie between these two extremes. So there's one completely developed economy, and then there are subsistence economies that consume what they make. So can anybody give me an example of subsistence economy? China's subsistence economy? No. Pakistan?
Yeah, we are an agriculture country.
You export cotton, you export. Subsistence economy is an economy that consumes what it produces, right? So for instance, you're living in a village, let's say it's a country, let's assume. You grow wheat, North Korea, could be right. India is not a subsistence economy.
Can we call it a growth economy?
Brazil is a subsistence economy? I strongly doubt it. North Korea is a good example of subsistence economy. They have trade barriers. There was a meeting between Kim Jong-un and Trump in which Kim Jong-un emphasized that if the trade barriers are lifted, only then he would give up his nuclear weapons, right? But Trump disagreed on that, as a result of which the talks failed. So the talks were held in Vietnam, where Kim Jong-un asked for lifting the trade barriers, and he agreed if the trade barriers would be lifted, he would give up on the nuclear weapons, right? So coming back to the lecture.
Ma'am, does the US or Trump impose the trade barriers on countries, or is it like North Korea?
Now, why would North Korea impose trade barriers on them? North Korea did not impose trade barriers, but because it's the world. The world considers North Korea as a threat. It considers it as an irresponsible nation, so they've imposed trade barriers on it. Right? But, you know, just to exemplify how whatever they make, they consume it. They're pretty much on their own for generating everything, right? So they have their own version of internet and everything. Now coming back to, where were we? Now, this changing economic environment has resulted in a tiered market. What does that mean? It means that there are different groups. There's a stratification in marketing. You have stratified the market. You have created stratas in your market. When I talk about stratas, what stratas are we talking about? It's about income distribution stratas. So there would be upper class consumers, there would be middle class, there would be working class, and the last one would be underclass consumers. This is how your book has, you know, sort of created income distributions in the society. So based upon these income distributions, you create a product. So for instance, if you're creating a product that is for higher end customers, you would be targeting the upper class. If you're creating a very inexpensive product, that would be maybe for the underclass or maybe for the working class, right? So depending upon the quality of your product and how it is priced, you select the income distribution strata that you would want to capture, right? Now, talking about changing consumer spending pattern, one of the laws that explains the changing consumer income spending pattern is Angel's Law. Now, what is Angel's Law? Now, Angel's Law talks about as a household's income increases, the percentage of income spent on food decreases, while the proportion spent on other goods, for instance, luxury goods, would increase. Make sense? Anybody having?
Repeat the original
tier market. You create stratas, right? So if there's a bigger market, you create stratas. You create stratas on the basis of income. Stratas are segments, sort of, right? So that's a tier market. You create tiers. So the upper tier is upper class, then underclass. Coming down to Angel's Law, what does it talk about? If your income increases, your percentage that you spend on food, it would decrease, right? So 4 से ज़्यादा रोटी तो नहीं खा सकता, ठीक है? उसके बाद तो वो पैसा कहीं और जाएगा, right? So there's a limit to what you can consume in food items, right? After which you would not consume. So the percentage that you consume, that you spend on food, it would decrease. But the amount that you can spend on other luxury items, it can increase and it will increase. So this is Angel's Law.
Sometimes the percentage on the income you spend on food also increases. you buy food of better quality which are expensive, so that way the income, the percentage income will increase.
In that, what you're talking about is the absolute term. It would increase in the absolute term, you're very right. But the percentage, on average, it would decrease. But absolute spending on the income, absolute spending on the food, it would increase. But if you take that is the change in absolute terms. But if you take the percentage generally would decrease, right? Coming down to the natural environment. Natural environment. What is natural environment?
Natural resources.
Natural resources. Anybody else? Okay. So natural environment involves natural resources that are needed as inputs by marketers and that are affected by marketing activities. So you're marketing your products, they affect the natural environment of the planet. Now there are different trends that are there. There's shortages of raw material. Shortages of raw material how?
Mineral oil and petrol.
Petrol. Okay, you're searching for alternate energy sources, right? So since the petroleum reserves are depleting on the earth, so you're looking for other resources for energy. Then, any other example? The biggest example these days in Pakistan? Water. Right? Dam क्यों बना रहे हैं? Because we want to create a water reservoir so as to save water, right? It is quiet. So water resources, petroleum, these are all good examples for shortages in raw material. Coming down to increased pollution. Now many of the companies in the past, they never realized what sort of pollution that they're creating. Now the MNCs, they're greatly concerned over the amount of pollution that they create, because the shares, their goodwill is affected by that, right? So if a company creates a lot of pollution in the environment, its shares might not do well on the stock exchange as somebody who has concern for the environment. So as a goodwill gesture to the environment, as being, as following the societal concept that we studied, if you want to take that into account, then you need to pay attention to the environment as well and the increased pollution. So for instance, you need to stay socially correct. That's the goal of the business as a marketer, right? So for instance, your local tobacco company, what is its name? Pakistan Tobacco Company. It plants a lot of trees as an effort to reduce pollution, right? But what it does is it produces tobacco, which is bad for the health, right? So it is trying to balance out the negative effect that is creating with the positive efforts that it's doing, right? So that's the marketing aspect of it, right? Does that answer? Now, increased government intervention. Government is also intervening on how you can protect your natural resources. Making a dam is one of them. Another one could be that you cannot, go for hunting. That is another, controlling the pollution. That is again increased government. In months back, we had the plantation campaign from the government, right? So that is Billion Trees project. So this was government intervention. Talking about environmental sustainability is whereby companies try to create policies which can result in which are environmentally sustainable. Now what do we mean by environmentally sustainable? That means creating a world economy that planet can support indefinitely. So what does that mean? If we continue to create or do the business the way we're currently doing, we will soon run out of resources, right? We would soon run out of a planet that has an environment conducive for human living, right? So, for instance, the air may be too polluted for humans to live in. The germs would grow stronger. So you want to create products and you want to create businesses that are environmentally, sustainable, which do not affect the environment negatively. So you want to create an economy that is nature friendly. It does not create, it does not, ruin your nature, rather than it should support the nature. Now coming down to technological environment. Technological environment is what? The change in technology, right? So at what time do you think the internet came in? And the impact that it created? The internet came in somewhere mid-1990s, right? And the impact that it has created, it is enormous. So we talked about in another class how it has resulted in data generation. So 90% of the data that is there on earth has been generated in the past, let's say 1-2 years. That's the power of the internet. That's the power of technology, right? And it is the data that would result in, what would that result in? Further transformation, right? So the data generation is as a result of technological changes. The new marketing strategies are a result of changing technology. So every day you have new technology coming up that would make the old technology obsolete. It would make the old technology obsolete, so you would have to create products according to the new technology, right? So there was Orchid, then there came Facebook, then there came Snapchat, then there came WhatsApp. So these are all changing technological forces, and it has resulted in increased connectivity between people. And this increased connectivity between people has resulted in globalization, right? So people do not care for boundaries these days. Somebody living in Pakistan can connect with somebody living in America. So this has created a boundaryless environment, right? Which is, again, a fact that needs to be taken care of when you're making strategies. Coming down to the political environment, consists of laws, government agencies, pressure groups that influence or limit various organizations and individuals in a society. So the other day we talked about the imposition of ban on Indian content. Now this comes under political environment, right? So political environment forced us to put a ban, as a result of which the businesses of cinemas would be affected, right? Let's just not say collapsed. Okay, ji? Now legislation is done for public policy. It is done to protect companies, it is done to protect consumers, and it is done to protect the society as a whole. So do legislation so as to protect businesses. So for instance, let's say there would be a new law that would require the companies to make financial disclosures. So Sarbanes-Oxley is a law that deals with that, right? So Sarbanes-Oxley talks about financial disclosure. That would result in, what would that result in?
The financial condition, or where a business stands.
It would tell the people where business stand, as a result of which at the end of the day, the person who would be investing in the business, he would be making an informed decision. So Sarbanes-Oxley is a legislation that was done in America so as to protect companies, right? And to protect the future prospective investors. Now you do legislation to protect the consumers, to protect the society, so all this comes under political environment. Coming down to the cultural environment. What is cultural environment? Cultural environment talks about values, it talks about perceptions, it talks about behaviors. So when we talk about values, what values are we talking about? What values are we talking about?
Values of the locals living in
Ethical values. We're talking about generally two values, the core value and the secondary value. So core value is something that you take from your parents. Okay? It's generally hard to change. So core values, beliefs and values have a high degree of persistence, are passed from parents to children and are reinforced by schools, churches, businesses, governments, masjids. So this is all core value, right? So core value would not change easily, right? With secondary values, they're more open to change. So for instance, our core value is that we're Muslim, right? Our secondary value is how we practice Islam, right? So I might practice Islam in a different way, you might practice Islam in a different way. That is our secondary value. So the core value is the same, we are all Muslims, but the secondary value is different, right? A good example given on in your book is that of marriage. So, yeah. So the core value is that, you need to get married for a, for a, reasonable living. But at what age should you get married? That varies from person to person. That would be secondary value, right? So this is how you differentiate between core value and secondary value. Now responding to the marketing environment. Now we talked about marketing environment being in continuous flux. It's continuously changing. What do you do with that changing environment? You rather be proactive, or you would be reactive, or you would not do anything about it. So you would consider these factors uncontrollable and would adapt to these factors. That would be treating them uncontrollable, right? So a proactive approach is where you forecast that there's a changing trend that is coming, there's a changing technology that is coming, there is a change of legislation that might be there, right? So you start making strategies and you start steering your business in that direction. That is a proactive strategy. So you've forecasted the environment would change in this way, so you've adjusted yourself that way. The second would be reactive. So the change has come now, and now you would want to make way. And the third way is uncontrollable. You treat it uncontrollable, you don't do much about it. And if you don't do much about it, there would be soon time that you would go out of business. So with this, we've come to the end of the chapter.